Good morning everybody, Mr. Mann here, and I hope you're all safe and well and had a really good weekend. And if you had snow yesterday, I hope you're able to get out and about in the garden and have a bit of fun at the same time. So, start of a new week, and my assembly for this week is the second of 4 assemblies that, as you know, I'm going to be doing on mental well-being and mental health. And today we're going to focus on stigma. Okay, and from last week we sort of introduced the whole idea of what is mental health and mental well-being, and how we all at times suffer with and have to deal with our own mental health and mental well-being. And today is actually looking at another side of it and how that is portrayed in the media, and how we react to people who are struggling, and what we can do about that to try and support them and help them in the future. Now, in the past, mental health used to be portrayed in quite a negative way through the media and films and television. And over the last probably 10 years or so, but especially in most recent times, celebrities in particular have been far more outspoken to show and to explain their own difficulties around their own personal mental health, which has allowed more of us to talk about it in the media and in schools and potentially at home. And this has therefore portrayed mental health as being something that is important that we all understand, that we appreciate that people will be struggling at different times in their lives. And therefore, as an individual, we need to look after ourselves, but also those that we care around us. And that's been a really good thing. But regrettably, as in all things, there is always sometimes the negative side to how it is portrayed and how mental health is portrayed. And this is what is known as, being a stigma. And as you can see here, the definition of unfair attitudes towards people with mental health problems. So we treat people who are suffering with mental health in a negative way, that there is something in particular wrong with them. And therefore, what comes from that is then you start to discriminate against them, and you start to treat them differently, unfair behaviours towards people with mental health problems. And on the next slide, you'll see some examples of how young people have explained that even today in having to cope with their own mental health and how people then related to them. So first of all, these Change Young Champions are volunteers aged 16 to 25 who have experienced their own personal mental health problems. And you can see from some of the quotes they said, even today, the way people spoke to them or judged them or thought about them, or how they felt people thought about them, was really, quite hurtful and didn't help them in progressing. Saying that they didn't need any help, stress is normal, that feeling as though everybody knew that they had a problem, when in fact the reality might not be the case. But being told that they are struggling, but they can't be struggling because, everything appears all right on the surface. They're doing well in their academic work. They appear to be smiley. They appear to be engaged. But underneath that, if you peel away that very fragile layer, the young person is really struggling inside. And on the next slide, I'm going to take you straight to a film, and where some young people have talked about what does stigma actually look like to them and how it's impacted on them.
I was first diagnosed when I was 16, so it was just after my 16th birthday. I was diagnosed with depression. At the time it was quite severe.
I was diagnosed with anxiety and depression when I was about 17, 18, going through my last year of school.
I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder when I was 15.
I went to a doctor, and a month later they diagnosed me with depression and put me on some antidepressants.
I developed depression when I was about 15.
I have suffered from depression, anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder.
I think the main kind of stigma is, well, what's wrong with you? You've got the perfect life, why wouldn't you be happy? And just mainly people thinking it's a choice to be depressed. Nobody in the world would choose to feel depressed and isolated and completely horrible about themselves. So for someone to say or suggest that it's your fault, it's pretty horrible, because then you kind of start blaming yourself and then it just escalates.
Shortly after I was diagnosed, I experienced a bit of discrimination at school. One of the teachers just didn't quite understand. I really do feel like she viewed me as kind of weak or like making it up, or she just didn't take it as seriously. That was really difficult for me because, especially in the school environment, and they say it kind of in front of the whole class, it does impact you.
You kind of experience a lot of stigma and discrimination, not necessarily personally, but just out kind of in the community and out when people are talking, and just kind of wry comments people make, like kind of schizo or lunatic, etc. Although they're not meant to harm anyone particularly, they can really affect someone who's trying to cope with their own little crisis, and it does make a massive impact to them if they look round and see people kind of treating them in this way.
When I was writing my CV, and I'd written obviously that I had been in a period in a mental hospital and stuff like that, so that was on my CV, and I was told that was stupid, and people wouldn't take me on because of that. And actually, I actually got a job when I'd first written my CV, but they'd picked up on that and they sort of took me inside and said, "Will you show up?"
I first experienced stigma when I was 12 years old, when I was first referred to the Child and Adolescent Mental Health Services, and my counsellor put it down to teenage angst and hormones, and it completely put me off trying to seek help for quite a long time.
When people were stigmatising me, I felt quite sad, and I also panicked me more, so it made my OCD worse, because I realised that people were picking up on the things that I was doing, people commenting about them, and also people were avoiding me because I was doing these things.
So you can see from those examples how stigma has really played an impact on those young people's lives. Unfortunately, they've come out the other end. So the last part of this assembly really is about what you can do and what we can all do to challenge stigma when we see it. And again, there's a short film just coming up which maybe give you some ideas to think about. So in challenging stigma then, what can we do in a nutshell? First of all, appreciate that we're all different and we all have different degrees of mental well-being and mental health. We all have mental health to consider, and that's really important all the time, like we do when we focus on our own physical health. And finally, we'll all react in different ways and no two people will react the same. So that's important that we appreciate and understand that. But then we also challenge stigma. We challenge the idea of wrong information being shared or discussed, and challenge those that really just don't understand. That's so important, and that's how we break down these barriers. And finally, if you are struggling yourself or you know someone who is struggling, talk to friends, to a teacher, to someone in your family or just someone you trust. The more we talk about these things, the more we open up, the more we can improve our own understanding, but the more we can actually get better ourselves. So that's the end of today's assembly. Hope you found it really informative. You've got an exciting week of learning yet again ahead of you. I hope you all get online, you all engage with what you're having to do and what you're needing to do. And I will speak to you next week. Take care now. Bye-bye.